Here are the objectives for this module.
So now you have a basic understanding of the VMware whiteboard. So next, I'm going to be serving as your coach and kind of walking you through some tips, examples, and practices for how you might use this whiteboard in a mock customer conversation. It's important to note, the idea isn't for you to repeat this whiteboard or to duplicate it exactly as you're about to see it. These are just some different places that a customer conversation might go and ways that we might approach those different topics. You're going to be using the information in the coming modules to increase your level of expertise and your understanding of the VMware ecosystem and the products and how they layer onto the customer demands and needs and requirements and opportunities. So you'll then be able to use this whiteboard framework to create highly repeatable, simple, easy to understand, and really flexible ways of communicating VMware solutions onto customer opportunities for improvement. So without any further ado, let's take a look at some examples of how we might use the VMware whiteboard. So now let's refamiliarize ourselves with the core concepts and tools that we're using. We have our on-premises side of the whiteboard. We have our off-premises side of the whiteboard. And up here we have our user-centric area of the whiteboard. If you remember the quadrants, you'll remember that anything that lives down here is going to be data center based and on-premises. And anything that lives up here will be on-premises and user-focused. The other side works the same way. This quadrant will be data center focused and cloud. And this will be user center focused and cloud. And then we have the center area here for all our hybrid technologies that can easily touch both on and off premises. This whiteboard framework allows for innumerable customizations across different audiences and scenarios. Focus on the basic whiteboard, the general layout and understanding of on versus off premises products, those which are data center versus user centric, and you'll do great. What would it look like to talk to a customer about these ideas? The first thing we should do is remind ourselves that we want to be consistent with things like use of color and the way that we're whiteboarding for the customer. It's recommended that you have a set of whiteboard markers with the colors black, blue, red, and green. Black denotes all of your known environmental constants, or your framework. Then we have blue, which introduces variables, things that may or may not be there, things that we're still questioning, vetting out, or trying to decide, or maybe even options inside our conversation. Then we have red, which introduces the idea of a problem area, or better stated, an area for opportunities or an area for growth. The last is green, and that's the solution, how we are going to apply a solution into this space. For our customer conversation example, we're going to stay away from blue. For our particular case, we're going to avoid variables and look at what is known, look at potential problems and the areas of solution. A good way to start this conversation is to discuss, what does your environment look like? So let's begin. Thank you for having me here today. I'm glad we took time to discuss what you're trying to do with VMware technologies and, as a whole, what you as a customer are trying to do with your data centers. What I'd like to do now is to map out what's going on in your environment and get a really good holistic understanding of what technologies can be used to reach your goals. Now, VMware firmly believes in a holistic approach where we leverage your existing investments and expand the ecosystem of your data center. We're not simply walking in here and saying that we are going to rip and replace. Now, at this point, you might ask the customer, How many physical data centers do you have? So let's say that the customer responds, we have 2 physical data centers. One is our primary data center, and the other one is for failover. So in the on-premises space of the VMware whiteboard, I draw out their primary data center as data center A, and their secondary one as data center B. Then we say to the customer, now let's take a look at your primary data center first. Inside this data center, if we were to look at the resources, obviously the data center consists of 3 core types or categories of resources. Inside our data center we have compute, we have storage, we have networking. So now we're going to take a look at those and touch on them. And all of these things together live inside the data center. We can also assume that we have the same 3 types of resources inside our other data centers. So we can move around and say we have compute, storage, and networking inside the other data center as well. So the next question is, how virtualized are you inside these data centers? The customer comes back and says, we're actually about 80% virtualized. Okay, great. In our estimation, that means that in the primary data center right here, we're about at this line. We have a fair amount of virtualization occurring inside this space. Great. That's good for us. And so now we can put a little mark here that says we're about 80% virtual. Then our next question could be, what's going on with that other 20%? This might be a place to use that blue pen. So we'll ask, inside this 20%, what is it? So they come back and say, that 20% is mission critical, and we have really steered away from virtualizing it because we're not sure how it's going to perform, and we're unsure about how we're going to monitor it. So they're giving us some words here. Clearly, they're concerned with monitoring. They're concerned with performance. And we also know that we have some physical workloads that we need to deal with. So now we know we have physical impediments and concerns with monitoring and performance inside that 20%.